So I'm very, very excited to be here today. I was actually born in London, and I've spent the last 35 years living in Israel, 20 of them in VC and PE. So it's an amazing amount of satisfaction at seeing such a great crowd coming to hear what we're doing and to see what we could do together. I'm happy to invite today a dear friend of mine, of JVP and of Israel, G'rmmy, the executive chairman of Kóllar Capital. G'rmmy is actually a pioneer of the private equity secondary market. His firm, Kóllar Capital, has raised over the last 20 and so years over $20 billion in assets and has invested in approximately 16,000 private companies worldwide. G'rmmy has been named Europe's Personality of the Decade by Financial News, and Private Equity News voted Kóllar Capital as the most influential player in European VC 4 years in a row for its extensive investments in assets such as Bell Labs Ventures portfolio and British Telecom's incubator, not to mention the large portfolio of IP. In 2008, G'rmmy established the Kóllar Institute of Private Equity at London Business School, and in 2013, the Kóllar Institute of Venture at Tel Aviv University. Then earlier this year, his charitable foundation made its largest gift yet to endow the Kóllar School of Management at Tel Aviv University. G'rmmy is also recognized for his charitable work in the field of human health and animal welfare, and in 2013, he launched FAIR, an investor network for farm animal welfare, which has already attracted investors with over $1.5 trillion in assets. So with all of that, I'm happy to invite G'rmmy Kóllar to join me. You've done an awful lot, G'rmmy. Over the last 26, 27 years, you've been called by many as really the founder, the forefather, the creator of the secondary market in PE. How did it all come about? How did it all start?
Well, I hated secondaries. I was doing it at ICI, at a pension plan, to save the market because of missing out the J-curve. And I wanted to be a buyout guy, so I set up the first fund of funds for Europe to do co-investments, and then I could be a buyout guy because no buyout fund was hiring from a pension. And of course, when a plan hits reality, reality wins. And it was just after the Gulf War. And so I changed my plan from what I wanted to do to how the fuck do I get into business. And if everyone hated private equity, started buying it. And have been ambulance chasing around the world ever since.
Well, you've actually grown. I mean, raised over $20 billion, 7 funds later. What do you view as what was key to creating this scalable business?
I think if I took one key point, it's one thing being a pioneer, but actually industrializing secondaries and getting it to this size is, I think, ownership. So we're 185 people. Our last fund is $7 billion, but there's one owner, which is me. And actually, in terms of building up any private equity or venture firm, I don't believe there's been any really successful venture or buyout firm with more than 2 owners to build out a vision. So you could take Warburg Pincus, which was Lionel Pincus, CVC, which was Citigroup, KKR, which was very quickly Kravis and Roberts. There's been no success. I think there's a lot of spin-out venture firms here, but I can guarantee if there are 4 partners starting the firm, it won't grow large. For the obvious technical reason that there's not a lot of equity to give out and people have different ideas of where they want to go, and you've got to build out a vision.
Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. If you wanted to add on that, what else would you say are other key factors to success of an investment group?
Obviously, you want to get consistency of performance. What you're doing is, for a venture or buyout firm, or for the structure of a private equity firm, you need consistency of performance. And that's all about focus, focus, focus. It's about alignment. So we've got an ethos which we use. I mean, I think because I came from a pension plan, I ask an investment committee a lot. A very simple question: is it good for the pensioners? So not is it good for Mechavim or BP pension, but is it good for the millions of pensioners? There's a very simple ethos. Look after the millions of pensioners. They'll look after the Collar Capital, and Collar Capital will look after its people. And that alignment is so simple, and so many general partners forget it. And I think the other thing has been, it's an extraordinarily competitive world, and as soon as someone is successful, what I found quite often is they go multi-strat. They start building other groups. And I think that is dangerous, because if we'd have done that, we'd have had a 2 billion fund instead of a 7 billion fund, and we'd have had a 500 million real estate fund, and this, and I wouldn't own 100% as well, which is wouldn't have been a good thing.
So for the last 4 years in a row, you've been voted, VC investor, leading player in European VC. What would you see are your key takeaways to the VC world?
I was voted most influential venture capitalist 4 years in a row because we bought all these laboratories. We bought Bell Labs, Incubator, British Telecoms. We've got a 1.1 billion joint venture with Shell Technology. But one of the things, and we're invested in 30 VC firms. You've got to listen to your investors to raise the money, etc. But I think the key takeaway is that general partners have to have confidence to hold their investments. So you've got, for instance, I'll give you an example. Hambro's Advanced Technology, which was a fund that was in the 80s, it had a £20 million fund. It owned 30%. It put $500,000 into a company called Racal Millicom, and it wanted to raise another fund 5 years later, obviously, because it needed another fund. So it sold its stake in Racal Millicom for $30 million, 60 times the money. Racal Millicom changed its name to Vodafone. They had 30% of it. They made 1.5 times the fund of 20 million on that 30% holding. How many venture capitalists sell their top performing investments? The old theory, you've got 2 out of 10 that are going to be successful. How many venture capitalists in Europe actually benefited from the success of the winners? I think your group has CyberArk and stuff like that.
Yeah, with CyberArk, that's exactly what we did. It was about carrying it all the way through to the end, and I think it's now listed and valued at about $1.7 billion, and I think it made a great return for the franchise. I think it was really about sticking with it all the way through.
Absolutely. So many Israeli venture capitalists and European venture capitalists. There are so many big companies like Vodafone that are great businesses, and the venture capitalists and more importantly, the pensioners behind them made no money because the investors demanded cash on cash before they put new money in, and the venture capitalists didn't have the confidence or conviction to hold on to the 1 or 2 winners that they might have in the portfolio. And I think that is the greatest, possibly the greatest difference with Silicon Valley, where there's a confidence to hold on to your Facebooks and Googles. How much, I don't know how much the VC made in Waze, but it was a big company.
So if we're talking about VCs, what are the areas that are interesting you at the moment? What are you looking at?
Myself, so on a personal basis, I am in more food technology companies than anyone else in the world. And I like internet stuff like Giphy and stuff like that because, I want to put bits of money in and big multiples. I'm waiting for that big that big winner, etc. But food technology is fascinating. There's a new revolution coming, which is the food technology. You've seen the super meat one from Israel, which is, I mean, very far behind some US Memphis meats and others. But it's very exciting and may help stop the cruelty to animals.
I got a question here to the audience, and I think it'll be interesting for you, Jeremy. How many people here went to Tel Aviv University? Go on, put your hands up. See, that's a good one. So earlier this year, Jeremy, you made this really high-profile, amazing donation to Tel Aviv University.
Only high-profile in Israel.
It is high-profile in Israel. To the new, what's become the Kölner School of Management. Why did you choose Israel?
Well, I had well, actually, going back a bit. So I chose Israel because it says in my obituary when I die at 98 that I have a business school named after me. And I mean, amongst other things. But I chose Israel because I wanted to back venture and in education. And so for me, a natural hub was either Stanford, California, or Tel Aviv. And I chose Tel Aviv because it's nearer and was cheaper than Stanford, is a big reason. But also a major reason, actually it was a choice between Stanford, which was just in the head, but there was a real choice between Imperial College in the UK and Tel Aviv University. And a professor at Harvard persuaded me that Israel was the right place because we had a chance of, it was such an entrepreneurial country, and universities are so bureaucratic, they're owned by faculty, effectively, and very little changes at a university very often. And they said, he persuaded me that there's more chance to, that the previously known Recanati, now Kölner School of Management, had a chance to be a great business school.
So on that note, what are your plans for it? I know that you've got a big passion around venture.
I've just given it a very simple objective, which is to be number one in the world. and number one in the world means that number one, so Harvard is number one for strategy, Wharton for finance, Kellogg's for marketing, Tel Aviv University Business School can be number one in the world for venture, and that's the mission, to be number one in venture, and then of course you get a glow across different departments through that. And anyone here knows we've just got a new chairman of an advisory council, the number one professor in the world, Josh Lerner, and then Steve Kaplan, who happens to be the number two in Chicago booth. Josh Lerner's at Harvard. We're creating an advisory council to help Tel Aviv University become number one in venture in the world.
Well, that's amazing, and it's a great privilege for us. So thank you very much, and thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming today.